This is the most advanced appointment booking agent on N8N. First, we'll go over the structure, then the demo, and then the actual setup. Everything starts from the N8N. This is where the engine is built. It is connected through APIs to our version of high level, which is the one prompt that we allow our members to resell. But you can use any high level account that you have. And within the high level, you have a Google Calendar or Microsoft Calendar connection. You can obviously connect Google Calendar directly to the N8N or use something like cal.com or Calendly. The reason why we're using high level is first because we're using the one prompt as a suite, as a sales system in a box. And also the high level has really flexible APIs that allow us not only book, but also reschedule and cancel appointments, as well as to attach them to the contacts. Now, let's actually go through the chat together and let's see how it works. Hi, I want to book something. We have not deployed through WhatsApp, SMS, or live chat, just so that you can see on the back end how everything is going and how it's calling different API endpoints. So it says what time and date. So this is the calendar. This is May. Let's say we're looking for something like May 13th at 6 p.m. This is the Minsk time. Let's try maybe May 13th at 6 p.m. Now, 6 p.m. depending on the business that you're working with or the use case you are building it for might have different meanings. If you're working with a company that only operates in a certain country that has one time zone, or within a business that only operates in one state that has one time zone, it's easy. Most of the businesses that we work with have multiple time zones. They serve either nationwide or worldwide. That's why we need to understand what is the time zone of the user before booking an appointment correctly. So this is what it is actually doing, is asking for the city or the region. Now we can say the Eastern, or let's actually say I am in Minsk right now. This will call the get time zone JavaScript. So it's going to convert it into the proper formatted time zone that we can use to then check for available slots. It says that we've got the slot. Now it's asking for the email. We're not asking for the phone or email right away because it doesn't really make sense. This is not how the conversational agents work. This is not how humans work. We first need to identify if we can get the user in, right? So maybe all the slots for a year are booked. So there's no reason to capture the user email or phone number. So now, because it is directly connected to the one prompt to the contacts, again, I'll explain how you can do that for your own high level. Don't worry about that. Here, you will provide the contact information. So let's say we're going to say like Eugene testing YouTube at gmail.com. This is my email. Now, it's going to try to find us in the system. If the contact is found, it's going to book the appointment and attach the appointment to this contact. If the contact is not found, and this contact is not found, because if we go here, it doesn't exist. So what it's going to do is going to ask us for the full name, just because we need the full name to book an appointment, to create the contact first and then attach the appointment to the contact. We'll say, sure, it's Eugene OpenAI, something like that. Let's say OpenAI is my last name. I hope it's going to catch it. Now, as you can see, it's running the get contact, then it's creating the contact. It's getting the available slots just to make sure that everything is set up correctly. And then it's going to book an actual appointment because we don't need the verification, the additional step where it's going to ask, are you sure that you want to book that? Now, it says that you are all set. If we go to our calendar, you'll see that the appointment was booked. So this is the Minsk time. So here's the 6 p.m. If we go to our system right now, you'll see that this contact, Eugene OpenAI, was populated, and here is the actual email. If we go to this contact, you will see that the appointment was actually already created and attached to this contact. So now you can manage the entire pipeline and create different automations on top of that. So if you want to create something like the follow-up, you can just go into the automations and go through. So we have it, already built in, but you can, create it from scratch and say when there's like 1 hour before the appointment, you'll start making the different automations. So you do not need a third-party tool or like a layer, like a service layer that will interact within your agent. Now, if you do not want to use entirely, high level as the CRM, and this is a very popular use case when you're working with a business, they do not want to have their like an entire CRM setup besides what they have right now. That's why when you're presenting it to the client, you're presenting it as appointment booking system, sales system, whatever you want, but not as the CRM, even though the high level is the CRM by itself. Now, if you're working with more tech-savvy business owners, founders, or decision makers, if they heard about high level, if you're going to mention that, obviously there will be some objection handling, because they're saying, hey, no, but like we do not need a high level. We would want this setup to be connected to our HubSpot. Now, you can obviously do that easily. Now, you can replace, we'll go over this API endpoints. You can easily replace them with, Pipedrive, Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever you want. But the difference is that this is just one part of the solution, right? I'm not presenting this as a final thing that you would sell to your clients. This is, within the appointment booking agent, this is just one step that is actually booking the appointments or rescheduling or canceling them. But then you would want to make sure that the user like either show up, sign up, or view the demo. Then you would want to follow up with this prospects, maybe reactivate them afterwards. So you would want to have an entire sales pipeline automated after the user comes into your system. That's why you still need a third-party, software as a layer. If you are connecting this to the HubSpot, sure, you can, use the cal.com, you can get all the contacts and create all the contacts inside the HubSpot, but you would not be able to create a automations on the backend that I was listing earlier, right? So you would still need to maybe use the Airtable if you don't want to use a high level where you track the progress of each and every prospect. Now, let's actually clean this chat, right? So it doesn't remember the history. And let's say I want to reschedule my appointment, okay? Let's see what's gonna ask us. It should say that first it can give me the email or phone number, because yeah. So if we go to the contact that was created, right? So let's say this is us. I think it should be this. Now, if we would have a phone number, it would check for either the phone number or the email. That's why it is asking for either the phone number or the email. So it says that it found the appointment, which is this time. Let's say we want to reschedule it for what? For Thursday, like 5 p.m. for 15th. So how about Thursday, May 15th? 15th at maybe what? At maybe 5 p.m. 5 p.m. Now, because it is already connected to the contact, so now we need to check the time zone, right? So yeah, I am in Minsk. Now, if you are not dealing with the time zones, you would just remove the instructions from the prompt, and you would remove this function, and you are good to go. So it looks like there are any available slots. Okay. And it's probably doing that because this is connected to multiple calendars and not only this one. So okay, so let's move it to 4 p.m. 13th. Okay, let's move it to the same day as it is right now, just earlier to something like 4 p.m. to something like 4 p.m. Let's see. Again, so there's a discrepancy because they're in like multiple calendars. So it's when it's checking availability, it's receiving the 0 because there are no available slots. Figure out of the openings for the day, but maybe slots. Okay, but there are lots of available slots Friday, May 16th. Okay, so let's do. Okay, let's do May 16th at 4 p.m. Reschedule it to that time. Okay, let's see. So as you can see, it's running the update appointment thing. You're all set. So if we come here, you'll see that this appointment was moved. And it's actually not updating the calendar just because, whatever, just because there's some delay. Now let's go into the actual setup so that you can see how everything is structured on the backend. So the very first step is the webhook or chat module. Because we are chatting here, it's connected directly to the next step. At the end of the video, I would want us to connect it to one of the channels like SMS or maybe WhatsApp. That's why I will plug in the webhook. This is partially built on top of our master sales agent template. That's why you can see a lot of the things here. Now, just to be clear, I don't want to go over this in very details. Basically, the idea is that because we are providing, the master sales template to all of the members, we are wanting to have it very easy to set up the template. So now you have basically the custom fields that you're setting, right? So you are setting all the prompts and all the information about the company, as well as all the references that will be used dynamically in one specific step. So here you are setting all the fields. First, you're specifying the bot persona. Then you're specifying the reply rules on how you would want AI to behave. Even though we're not actually using it in this setup, I just wanted to let you know that. And for example, the last user utterance we're setting up based on the chat message received in the input when we are chatting with the agent here. And we're not directly using this specific variable in all other agent steps because you would replace it everywhere. So let's say you're testing it with a chat message, right? With module, then you are transferring to the webhook, right? So it's ready for the production. Then you would need to get, the last user utterance here, right here, and then replace it in all other, sub-agents. You don't want to do that. It's not the most efficient way to do that. That's why we're only changing it here. And now this field called user utterance will always has the most updated user message. So same thing is happening with the set user ID, and then, with a call history, even though it is not connected. The next step is the chat memory manager. We are just getting all the messages from the memory and then cleaning them up with this JavaScript. We're powering everything with one chat memory module, which is the Postgres that built on top of the Supabase, and also one chat model. Again, so this is not, a regular setup that a lot of people use, but we like to keep everything simple, even though there are a lot of the connections here back and forth. You'll see that if you, let's say, you would need to change the memory, you would need to update the actual document, the table within the Supabase. You can go here, right? And you would just update it in one place, and it's going to be updated within the entire agent. Same thing with the model. You can just replace it here. It's going to be replaced in both like this, and this, which is not connected. Now, the actual magic is happening within the booking agent step. We have two prompts. The first one is the user prompt, and the second one is the system message. The user prompt is specifying the actual user utterance. It's not specifying the utterance of the user, but rather the field set user utterance that we were setting earlier here, okay? So that we don't need to set it up again if we are kind of playing around with going back and forth between webhook and the chat testing within the N8N. And then we are specifying some instructions on how to get the available slots from the API endpoint that we're calling. Now, I was mentioning at the very beginning that this is the most advanced appointment booking agent on N8N just because it is an entire setup, right? It's not just booking appointment in the calendar. It is doing multiple things, which are, getting the available contacts. So finding the contact, creating the contact if the contact was not found, creating the appointment, then attaching the appointment to the contact. So there are a lot of moving parts. And most of these moving parts depend on the actual API endpoints that we're getting from the high level. That's why, they have like certain format on the output side, and also they require some format in the input side. So here we are we're like specifying how to work with certain responses when we are getting the contact, when we're running the get contact appointments tool, and I'll explain it a bit later. So then we are having the system prompt where we have, the instructions on how to run these tools. We will go over this in details a bit later, but first I want to explain all the tools that we're giving access to this agent. The first tool is just a custom code module where we are running the JavaScript to, here, as you can see in the description, use this module to get current time zone latest time. Because we need to understand the year, and like when the user says, hey, this is, this May 16th, let's book for this May 16th, we need to get the year and also the time for the time zone that user is mentioning, not only on the date, but also on the location that he is mentioning. And this is why we are using this specific custom code. Again, this custom code will be available for free in my resource hub, so there is a first link in the description. The full automation is not going to be available because this is only for the one prompt holders, but I am pretty sure you'll be able to set it up. The next tool would be get available slots. I reordered them so that it's easier for you to see it visually. So once we got the user time zone, right? So this is the very first step. So we are getting the time zone. Let's say we were saying Minsk, right? It's running the actual JavaScript. It's understanding that it's, Minsk time zone. It's also getting the correct, right now, the time and date, the year of the time zone and the location. Okay. Now, so this is done. The next step, if you remember the conversation from the demo, where it was asking for a specific time. Sometimes it asks for the time zone right away. Sometimes it asks for the time and then the time zone. It really depends on the prompt. You can configure it pretty easily. So here we are running the get available slots. If you look closely, the get available slots is not just the API endpoint, but rather the entire workflow. So if I open this sub workflow that is getting added here, you'll see that it is getting triggered when, it is executed by another workflow. Here we have a simple chat memory module because we need to get the memory to then extract information that was passed. So here in this tool, we are specifying that use this function to get the list of the available appointment slots. It could be ran when you're just booking an appointment, and also when you're rescheduling, because before rescheduling, you need to check if the slots are available. Then you're specifying what workflow you want to actually run, and you specify the session ID, the time zone that provided by the model, and the user input. So the user input is actually, specified by the set but by the set user utterance, the same way as we were doing before that. Now, if you go into the actual setup here, you'll see that we're getting the chat memory through the manager, through using, very important, through using the same session ID that we were using here. And the session ID equals, okay, it equals the, session ID from that we're setting here, which is very important. Now, in order for us to have a complete access to the right memory when we are, for example, connecting this agent to, to the email, to the WhatsApp, to the live chat, or to any other, channel, you need to always use the same identifier. And because everything is built on top of the high level in this case, we are using the contact ID as the identifier. So we are basically using this contact ID in the Supabase Postgres memory, right, as the actual, identifier. But as I said, we are not connecting it through the webhook. We are just testing it using the chat mode inside N8N. That's why we have the set user ID here. As you can see, we're setting the user ID. When we would connect the webhook, we would specify in the webhook, so when we're passing information to the webhook, we are also passing this user ID, right? So here we would replace it with the actual user ID that we're getting from the high level. But because we're not doing that, we have the chat message, module, and we're using the session ID of this chat. So it's the same thing. You do not need to replace it, for example, here. You like here, right? You're just replacing it here, and everything is getting updated. So some of these API endpoints also using session ID. That's why it's very important to have it in one place. Anyways, so now we are getting the memory, right? So we got the time zone. We are saying, hey, check available slots. Okay, it's running this workflow. It's getting all the conversation history. It's cleaning this chat history through through the JavaScript the same way as we were cleaning it here, and then we're using the extract module. Basically, the idea is that we're also specifying the user input and the cleaned user chat history, right? And we are extracting the start and end date based on the input schema. Okay, means that here in the chat, I was saying, hey, let's do for the May 16th. Or let's say if I would say, hey, can you, check for the May 16th, it would ask, hey, do you want to have a specific time or not? So when we provide all this information, it could be provided in multiple utterances. That's why we cannot just only pass the last utterance into this workflow and analyze only that. That's why we need to analyze the entire conversation history to retrieve this information. And we are retrieving the information in the year, month, and date format. It's very important. Once this information is retrieved, we are using the time conversion module from the N8N, is the default module, where we are providing the date, right, that was actually captured. And then we are converting this date into Unix MS timestamp. This is only relevant because the high level get available slots endpoint allows you to receive, allows you to get the data if you're inputting in the Unix format. Okay, this is just something that you need to deal with. So the same thing with the start date. Okay. Then we are, setting the start date and end date to the information that we got here, and then we are also setting the time zone, then like running the actual function. And running the actual endpoint. Now, so if you want to get all information about, high-level appointments, high-level, endpoints, high-level API docs, you'd go through this documentation and it's pretty clear. You can upload it to Cloud and you're good to go. I will just mention like briefly some of the things. You are specifying the endpoint here, right? Here is the free time slots. You are specifying the headers, right? I do not want to kind of leak my API key here. So you are having the authorization, the version name, which is the 2104 and 15. And you're also providing the query parameters. In this query parameters, you are providing the start date that was, converted here in the Unix format. Then you're also providing the end date and the time zone. So now you are calling this step. Let's see if it's going to be called. And we are getting the available slots for a certain thing. Because if the slots are not available, in this case, they are not available, we are actually receiving only the trace ID. That's why we were in the main prompt here specifying that if there's only traced ID received, it means that there are no available slots. Because when there are slots available, it will send a list of the actual slots. Okay? So, and then it will book the appointment here. So that is how we are getting available slots through the workflow. You can obviously just use the API endpoint that we're using here and call the same endpoint. But as I said, the problem is that you need the Unix format. So before putting the information into the query parameters here, you need to have a Unix format. But it's very hard to actually within the placeholders to specify that, hey, you need to get the user time zone and then convert it into the Unix millisecond format, just because this is a bit of like hard format to get formatted to. That's why it hallucinates a lot. So we need a separate workflow that we built, which is hosted like separately in a separate automation workflow. So the next step, when let's say we got the available slot, when the user specified that, hey, this is the time that I want, we are running this workflow, we are retrieving everything, we're setting it into the Unix format. Okay, so the time is available. The next step is to get contact. So here you'll see that run this tool to search contact in the system. We're using the get, so we're using a simple endpoint. So it's very simple. Here you have, the headers. The headers are always the same. You're using the same version. You're using the same API key and the content type. But within the query parameters, we are, specifying the query, which is a placeholder. Then we're specifying the location ID, and the location ID is always static, right? And then we are, again, so the location ID, it really depends on the location ID from a high level, so this is where you can get it. But within the query, we're saying whatever you insert a user provided value like email or phone number into, we only use the fields, always apply encoded URI component to it before inserting it into the URL. So basically, because this query is used to search for the contact information in our system, it's very important to use the placeholder, and it's very important to let AI know that you either need to use the phone number or the email, and then format it correctly in this format. Because it's very dynamic, because sometimes the user might provide the phone number, sometimes he will provide the actual email. We do not want to create like multi-step sequence and multiple endpoints depending on what the user provides. It will call different endpoints. No, or with a different query, with a different static query. So that's why we are using the placeholder here. So when this endpoint tool is getting run, we are getting the contact. If the contact is found, we will run the book appointment tool. But if the contact was not found, it's gonna run the create contact. Create contact, very similar thing. So we are giving the headers, and here we are having the actual JSON body with the placeholders, name, email, phone number. But as you saw, if you look here, you only have the email and the phone number, because this is how the endpoint works. If you do not necessarily need to provide the phone number in order to get it booked. So here you say, okay, so the name provided by the number, phone provided by the number is going to be empty if there's nothing, and then the email provided by the user. So you always need to have either the email or the phone number, but not both. Now, let's say the contact was created or was found, then we're booking the actual appointment. So we say use this function to create the appointment. So it's pretty straightforward, same thing. And we also use this this body. We have the calendar ID, location ID, which are static, right? Because you're having, the calendar ID, you specify the calendar here. So if you go to the calendars, you would have your calendar that you create here, okay? But you connect this calendar to something that, for example, you connect within your profile. So if you go to the My Profile, here you create the email, and here you create a calendar. Obviously, there's nothing here because it's connected to a different user. But when you create, let's say, the Outlook calendar, then you connect this specific calendar to the calendar, to the local calendar within the high level. So here you can see there is an ID. And if you go here, we are using this ID as a calendar that it's going to check to. So location ID is similar, is the same, but the contact ID is dynamic depending on what tool you ran. So if you always run the get contact, but if the contact was found, it's going to provide you the contact ID. If the contact was not found, it's going to create the contact, and then it will have the contact ID. So that's why in the placeholders here, you'll see the contact ID. You can get the contact ID from get contact. It will look like that. But it's smart enough to understand if we are going to create the contact, you'll also get the contact ID as the output, and it's going to use that. Okay. So then we are having the start time, the title, which is static. You can configure it here, and then all these settings that are very important to set up depending on how you would want to have the appointment look on your calendar. Now, for some of our clients that we're actually deploying it to, as I said, like the appointment agent is just one part of the system that we're usually developing. We sometimes not using the confirmed appointment status, and we want to make sure that all the appointments are confirmed manually by the human. That's why here, if you go to the one prompt or your high level, sorry, that I'm using the one prompt as an example, you would have the appointment list. And when the new appointment is created, we're notifying the user. And here you can go to the contact, to the actual appointment and confirm it manually when you are receiving all the information about this appointment through the notes. Okay. So, and then you specify everything here. When the appointment is actually booked, we are ready to go. So it's notifying the user, if you set it up within the automation that you can create when the new appointment is created, notify the user and provide him all the context about this appointment. So you can do different things, and that's the power of the high level in using it as an actual powerhouse. When we are saying that, hey, I want to reschedule an appointment, right? So this is what we were doing here. It's asking for the email right here. And when the email is provided, we are running the get contact. But if the contact was not found, it will say that, hey, I cannot find your contact, please verify your email. Because we said that we want to reschedule, we don't want to book, so it doesn't need to create a contact. So it's running the same function. Then we are asking it's asking for the time zone, so it's getting the time zone time. And then we are actually getting the available slots, right? When we're saying that what date we want. So it's getting the available slots. And then when the slot is available, it's just running the update appointment. So use this function to update the appointment. Always run get appointment before running this tool, because you want to make sure that the appointment slot exists. So it is free. Okay. So here everything keeps the same. We are using the calendar ID, location ID, and the start time. Okay. The appointment is always confirmed. So we're using the event ID placeholder and these things. So as you can see here, we have a separate endpoint. So the endpoint for the updating appointment is different because we are here specifying. So we're first trying to find the appointment. We're getting the appointment ID, right? And then, so if you look closely, it says that it found our appointment here. When it found this appointment, it has the contact event ID. And that's where we're using this event ID to then update this event to a different time. Okay. Now, this is kind of pretty straightforward. The hardest part, not the hardest, like the challenge within this agent is to make the agent understand the sequence of like how to call each and every tool and what information we retrieve from each and every tool. Of course, we have the placeholders right here, and we have the description, which helps the AI to identify when to run this tool and what information to input into the placeholders. But we also need to be very, very accurate in our prompting, where we specify how to do certain things. And this is where the system prompts comes in. This is a master prompt where I'm scrolling it down so you can, whatever, screenshot and do the same thing. This is where we specify the order that you would want to use when calling certain tools. So for example, available tools, strict usage order. So getting the contact, creating the contact, getting the time zone, there is a purpose, there is if and else. So if no slots is present, then ask the user to choose another date or offer 2 alternative slots. If you are getting only trace ID, it indicates that no slots are available. This is what we are having here, okay? And the same thing applies to all the different functions. Of course, we're not using and modifying it manually, and of course, we're using the markdown to make it more clear. So usually, let's say that I would want, if we, come here into the chat testing. So I think, okay, so here, how about I'm in minutes. Now, so let's say we would want for this agent to ask us when we say, like, I want to reschedule an appointment, we would want it to say, okay, but before I check your appointment and your contact, where are you located? So let's say we just want to have this first. We do not need to change anything in the tooling because the tools are the same. The tools are working great. It's just the sequence where you want to run what. So what, I would do, I would just literally go here. I would Control A, Control C. I would go to a ChatGPT. As you can see, I was playing around with this before the video. And here you would say, okay, so this is my prompt. And here's what I want, before, please modify the prompt, modify the sequence of actions in a way where when the user wants to reschedule an appointment, before actually asking for the time or any information, you need to ask for the location to check for the time zone. It's gonna, replicate it within a few seconds. So it's gonna create a new set of actions and steps. You just copy it and go here. That's why that's the power of having everything built in by default, okay? And then you're just playing around with different tooling.